I'm Lucy Jackson, Assistant Professor in Ancient Greek Literature.
I'm Erin Lee, Head of Archive at the National Theatre.
In this series of films, Erin and I will be looking at some of the Greek tragedies that have been staged at the National Theatre. Using the records held in the theatre's archive as a starting point, we'll look at the practicalities of staging an ancient Greek play in a modern theatre building.
The archive is home to thousands of items, from photographs to prompt scripts, technical drawings to set models, dating all the way back to our opening night in 1963. Every production has left behind some traces of the multiple artistic choices and practical considerations that go into making a performance.
By exploring these plays as staged productions, rather than as pieces of literature, we begin to see these ancient works in a new light. Going behind the scenes of the productions makes us ask fresh questions about why these plays and their myths are still relevant today.
In 2021, Kae Tempest's reworking of Sophocles' Greek tragedy Philoctetes, titled Paradise, was staged in the Olivier Theatre. It was directed by Ian Rickson, and the set and costumes were designed by Ray Smith.
It was the second time that this particular Greek tragedy had been staged at the National Theatre.
The first ever Greek tragedy produced by the National Theatre Company was Sophocles' Philoctetes. It was produced in 1964 in an adaptation by Keith Johnson, directed by William Gaskill, designed by Sam Kirkpatrick, and featuring in the chorus a young Michael Gambon, most famous today for his role as Dumbledore in the later Harry Potter films.
Twice then, this Greek tragedy has featured at a crucial moment in the National Theatre's history. Soon after forming as a company in the early 1960s, and again when the building reopened after a global pandemic.
The two productions took two very different approaches to adapting an ancient play for a modern world. Tempest's Paradise features modern clothing, set and props, 21st century military gear, and the script is written in modern and colloquial language.
On the other hand, the 1964 Philoctetes has its figures dressed in rustic woolly garb, antique-looking armour, and has a very sparse set. These actors would not look out of place in the swords and sandals type films that were so popular in the middle of the 20th century. But the production was still part of a very contemporary discussion about theatre. This Greek tragedy was part of a double bill alongside Samuel Beckett's short work, Play. By this choice of programming alone, audiences were invited to see Sophocles' ancient play as something to talk about in the same breath as one of the 20th century's most innovative and modern playwrights, Beckett.
In Tempest's Paradise, the obviously realistic and modern setting is complicated with a few items of surprisingly archaic Bronze Age equipment. A helmet of the sort that would have been worn by an ancient Greek soldier, and a large bow. We learn from the costume description that inside Odysseus's stab vest there was golden armour, another nod to the ancient world.
Both productions found a way to affirm that this play, first performed over 2,000 years ago, still speaks to modern concerns and modern-day audiences, but they did so with two very different approaches.
The records in the National Theatre archive give us a wonderful sense of the inspiration behind the design for Tempest's Paradise.
One of the features of this production was the way the stage space extended up and out of the central round stage of the Olivier. The use of concrete effect flats to articulate this space will have reminded the audience of the concrete design of many buildings on the South Bank, including the National Theatre itself.
The architectural echoes between the world of the play and the world outside had a very specific purpose here, underscoring one of the key features in this production, a community of people living outside and excluded from a supposedly civilised world.
For the last 2 decades or so of the 20th century, London's South Bank was the site of what became known as Cardboard City, a collection of temporary shelters for London's homeless. At its height, over 200 people lived here and formed their own community. It was demolished and disbanded in the 1990s. It is no coincidence that Kae Tempest has worked with the theatre company Cardboard Citizens, the only professional company in the UK for people who have been affected by homelessness. It is an issue that seems to have been close to the writer's heart, close to the theatre's own geographical history, and a central theme in this production of Philoctetes.
Homelessness is something that has only become more acute since the turn of the century and the austerity policies of the 2010s. The set design and these specific references brought this very contemporary social and political issue into dialogue with the ancient play.
But more than this, by showing a world of temporary shelters and outdoor living, the production gives space to the individuals in this type of community to tell their stories, show their dignity, and share in their sorrow and joy.
One of the boldest changes made in Kae Tempest's Paradise was to flip the gender of the cast almost entirely. Sophocles' Philoctetes is the only Greek tragedy we have that has no female characters in it. The 1964 production cast only male actors. By contrast, Tempest's Paradise had an all-female cast, something several newspapers noted in their reviews.
The design files held by the National Theatre Archive have some of the photos used by the production team as inspiration. We see many different kinds of community who, like the chorus in Paradise, live outdoors. Among these, we see several trans women, something that coheres with the reality of homelessness. According to research from Stonewall, 1 in 4 trans people experience homelessness at some point.
In the costume notes for the cast, we find something surprising. In addition to having male pronouns maintained for the characters of Philoctetes, Odysseus and Neoptolemus, both Odysseus and Neoptolemus wore silicone penises under their military trousers. Very few, if any, in the audience would know this was the case. This playing with gender is an intriguing marker of the conversation that was going on within the company. Once again, we see so clearly how a production is so much more than what the audience sees at a single performance.
The National Theatre Archive really is a unique resource that allows you to get up close to all these incredible productions and unlock interpretations of classic texts that perhaps you'd never considered before.
Anyone can book a time to access the resources of the National Theatre's archive by contacting us via our website.